I got to shoot this weekend and do a little bit of street photography with some Kodak Ultra Max, and it was a lot of fun. And I got some of the results back and I'm pretty happy with them, but still making some mistakes with the film photography because there's a lot to learn in the beginning. I wanted to make a video just on some of the basics in getting into film photography because I think there's the illusion, I guess, that it's very difficult to get into and very hard to start, and it's also very expensive. I think that it is cheap, it can be very easy, and it can be a very satisfying way to jump into photography because I think a lot of the cameras you get for digital photography are also quite expensive and they have a high bar to entry. You can do either one fairly inexpensively, but I wanted to talk about some of the basics that you could use to get into the film and also just kind of get your first roll back for under $100. All my prices are going to be in Canadian, and since our economy is not very strong, this means that it's even less expensive for everybody in the rest of the world. And so what I want to start with is just talking a little bit about the cameras in the beginning, because I've got two cameras that I primarily shoot with, which is the Pentax K1000 and then also a Nikon One Touch 100. And this camera cost me $250, and with it I got a whole bunch of other things too. I got a flash, I got some lenses, and so it wasn't all that expensive and it was in really good shape as well. I know there's a ton of the Pentaxes out there and they're still really reasonably priced. And I think you could either find one on Marketplace or eBay. They're always going to obviously be used, and so, but they're a very robust camera, and so I think they're a good one to start with if you want to try something out. This camera was actually given to me by my mom, and it's nice because she shot with it for so many years, just shooting kind of family stuff for us. But since switching to digital photography, we're not really using film all that much anymore. But this one's a very easy and basic one to get to use in the beginning because it's auto exposure and it feeds automatically as well, so there's not too much to learn. So I actually have a roll of some Phoenix 200 here. And so something like this you could get for, I think they're on eBay for anyway from $40 all the way up to $100. And I know that there's a lot of people selling cameras like this, or if you have some relatives, I guarantee you probably have at least one relative who has a film camera that they don't use anymore. So even if you want to borrow it just to try it out, that's a good way to just jump into it as well. But for something like this, you can easily just put it together really quickly. So it's starting to catch. All right, there we go. So I got some film in this camera now, and it's nice because since this camera is so inexpensive and since you can get some inexpensive film stocks for it, it's a really good way to just jump into the film photography without having to worry about the whole exposure difficulty as well. Because with this camera you have a lot more moving pieces. You have things like you need to set the ISO so that it's accurate. So for instance, I just threw some Electra 100 into this yesterday and it wasn't a good choice because I was shooting in low light conditions, so I had to stop doing the photography. But you have to control the shutter speed on it, you have to control your aperture on it as well, and then you have to control all the focal length, all of the manual camera settings, because the Pentax K1000 is fully manual. And so if you're getting something like that, it's good if you already have a basis with your photography, or if you're willing to learn the exposure triangle, then something like that would be a good place to start too. So you're going to learn a lot about the photography with something like this, but if you just want to snap some pictures and get some cool images and try out some different stock photos, different stocks of film, then something like the One Touch would be a little bit more accessible, I would say, and a lot less frustrating. So those are kind of two options that I would consider, and you don't have to get these cameras exactly. There's just a lot that are like that, and they would be very inexpensive to really try. If you're looking for other places to get cameras too, I got this one at a garage sale. So this is a Super 8 camera and it's a Sankyo, and it was only $100, and so I got this. It's basically brand new too, and it still functions really well. So, you know, check out some garage sales early in the morning and you might just get lucky sometimes. I think not many people use film anymore, and it's really hard to find people who will process things like Super 8 film, for instance, but 35mm is going to be, there's going to be a lot of options for it. There's also a really lot of inexpensive film stocks. These are just the boxes from some of the films that I'm currently shooting with or have just shot with. And so I just shot with some Kodak Ultra Max, and that was a good film to just kind of very, very basic film that was kind of versatile because it's got a 400 ISO. So that means that you can shoot it in a lot of different varying lighting conditions. It's better in slightly lower light. So if you're doing evening photography, you just want to find an ISO that matches versus something like an Electra 100. I actually had to stop shooting because of this one, because the ISO was too low, and if I dropped my shutter speed too low, then I was going to just blur out all of my images and or just not expose them correctly. And then something like the Phoenix is really fun to shoot with. It's a new film from Harman that I made a video about already, but it has a bit more of a sort of an orange tinge with more contrast and more grain. So it just depends on kind of where you want to start. There's tons of different films, but some of them are less expensive. So a good place to start, or at least where I would suggest everybody start, is Kodak Gold, because it's not expensive. It looks really cool because it's kind of got a bit more yellow in it, and so you have a little bit more warmer tones in your pictures. And I think it's just a fairly straightforward film to shoot with, and it's not more than, I think, $16 Canadian to buy. So I think it's there to work with and just trial a little bit, and you can actually get some really cool pictures out of it even if you don't really know what you're doing. So it's a good place to start with that. And also know that Ilford makes a lot of stocks that are less expensive, and even one that surprised me when I was at the camera store in Calgary was Flick Film, which is a film stock that's out of Calgary, Alberta, or not Calgary, Alberta, Longview, Alberta. So it's close to where I live, and I didn't even know that they existed until basically yesterday. And so it's really cool that there's a lot of these kind of options for other different film stocks that you could just try out, and they're under the $20 mark, and you know, that's I think that's a pretty reasonable entry for film anyhow. I mean, I'd love it to be $5, but it just isn't. So there are also some less expensive black and white stocks as well, so if that's an even more simple place that you'd like to start, that could be easier, because then you're not having to worry about your color and everything like that. But quite honestly, I think it'd be fun to start with color for most people, just because it's really the colors are what make film photography so interesting, and just getting a different look to your photos too. I think it really comes through with the color a little bit more. So again, my recommendation, something like Kodak Gold, but you could try something like Ilford. They have a variety of different black and whites as well that you could try out, and yeah, cool results with those too. I haven't tried them yet, but I've seen some cool videos of people shooting with that. Developing is obviously its whole own process as well. If you're just jumping into it, honestly, I would just say go and take it to a place like London Drugs, or a place that will just develop it for you, that is just kind of a chain. I think it's a good place to start. There are specialty shops that can develop. Their color development processes are going to be way more sophisticated and better than something like London Drugs. But again, if you're just starting out, if you just want to complete the process, get your film, then I would say go with the least friction and just go the simplest route. So I use London Drugs because it's straightforward. It's easy to get your photos back. If you are feeling more adventurous, you can definitely get some of the chemicals to do your own photos with, and I have developed a few rolls of film. But you need a lot of different things to do that, and I think that, you know, the best way to do it, I found, was to just get a kit in the beginning. So there's some kits that are not that expensive, and it teaches you a lot about the whole process as well. And you can actually get a lot of things for not that expensive either. So I think I got all of the things that I needed to develop film for under $200 Canadian. So again, if you think about the cost of digital photography versus something like film photography, you know, it just depends on what you, how high you want to go with the quality. But I think that you can get some high quality pictures with film for very low cost. I think, like I said, you can do it, that first roll, that whole process, for under $100, and that includes buying the camera as well, just because there are so many options that are available to you to buy secondhand. I think it's really cool that there are some cameras coming out like the Rolei, and they also have the new Pentax as well, that are new film cameras. So that means I think there's a little bit more money kind of going in the direction of film now, which is really awesome for me because I'm taking it up as a hobby. So great options for me. And there are companies, I guess, in even close to me, which I didn't expect, that are getting into the film distribution and production as well. So, you know, it's kind of exciting to see some of the options that are going to be available as well. But that also means that probably costs are going to be a little bit more stable as well, because if it just becomes more rare and rare, I think it would just get more and more expensive over time. But I think that things are relatively stable, and there are some options, and there's enough hobbyists that are interested in it. So I think that, yeah, I think there's just a lower barrier to entry for costs as well. The next thing I would talk about is scanning. So scanning is something that I haven't done a whole lot of. I have scanned some of my negatives using a light box and just taking a macro lens with my Sony a7 III, taking the pictures of it and then inverting the negative. Now there's a whole process here where you could invert your negatives using using different softwares, and this is going to make your colors more true. And again, for beginners, I don't know if this is the thing that you want to start with. So again, that whole development process, they'll scan your digital files for you and invert them. So you won't just have the negatives, you'll have the positives. And so I think that's probably actually a better place to start. I think that you can invert them yourself. I think that it is a lot of work. It's a lot of difficulty. And it could be expensive if you did buy a real light box. I just used my iPhone, and I got just a blank white image on the back of it, and I put some diffuse paper over the top of it, laid my film on top of the screen, and then took a picture of that. And it did work surprisingly well, but I would say that you can still see sort of the pixels of your phone, or the little, I don't know, the diodes on the smartphone, so you can still see, especially when it's blown up, you can see those little markers in it. And even with the diffuser paper, it was fine. But I think that, you know, if you really want to scan your own work and you really want to get good images that have good resolution, then you might want to do it in a more professional way. I know there's little tiny scanners that you can get, but I think the way I see that's most common for people to do is actually set up one of the light boxes with a lens on a good camera and just take images of their negatives and then invert them using software. So I think that whole process, you can almost skip over it as a beginner if it seems a little bit overwhelming, or if you're feeling adventurous, you could tackle it. And you know, I've done it a couple times, but I think, you know, the next step for me would be to figure out a little bit more how to do that more in a better way, because the way I do it now is just a little bit messy. You can't start out perfect. I think there's going to always be a lot of hiccups in the process here too. And like I say, I'm just making these videos for beginners as a beginner. So, you know, there's always going to be stuff to learn and stuff to improve. And I'm not made of money, so I can't just buy everything and then make it perfectly. You kind of have to do the janky way of doing it first and then improve your method as you go on. Printing is also something that I have mixed thoughts about as well. I think that it's really awesome to print the photos that you get and then to just get them back right away and have actual like 4x6 prints of it, so you can kind of flip through your photos and see them in actual print. You can also get digital files, high resolution or low resolution, and then choose the files that you want and then get those ones printed. I think what I want to do more in the future is just get them printed directly as photos of a certain size, so that I can actually look through them and have that enjoyment of seeing them in real print. And I think I would learn a little bit more with my photography with that as well. I think that the smarter way to do it is to do it the digital way, but I think that sort of ruins my process a little bit too, because I've just been getting them digitally and it hasn't been as much fun to just get the digital files. I really want the print photos at the end of it. So I think I'll probably just switch back to doing the print way, because then you get, I don't know, it's just more exciting to go and pick up your photos and get the actual images so you can look through them that way. It is really good to have options, and so, you know, I have a whole bunch of things that I've got, and they haven't been that expensive. So all in all, I think I've got 3 cameras, I've got all of my film, I've developed it probably about 10 times, and it probably hasn't broken $500 yet. So for me, I would consider that fairly cheap, because even just the lens on my digital camera right now is over that amount. And so, you know, I think you can do a lot within the realms of film photography for not that much money. And I think that it is actually a good way for, you know, beginner photographers to kind of jump into it. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of good options. And so I just wanted to share those. I hope it was useful. And then if you do have any questions, post them in the comments, because if I don't know, someone else probably will. And yeah, have a great rest of your week. Hope the video was fun to watch.